Okay, hello. This is a walkthrough of scuttle-dark-crystal. It's going to be a little bit bumpy because I've only done some prep and I need to share screen. So this is Dan Hassan who's going to be asking questions as we go. Share screen. Boom. Oh look, we're in the corner. That's great. Okay, so what are we going to do? We're going to look at what are the domains, like what are the sorts of messages involved in a DarkCrystal sharding. And then we're going to look at an example method from scuttle-dark-crystal. Scuttle-dark-crystal is a helper module which basically provides getter and setter methods for this Scuttlebutt database. And then we're going to look at so we'll look at a specific method and like building it up from scratch maybe, and then like talk about how the broader scuttle module pattern works and why things are laid out the way they are, and then we'll look at some testing. And I think that'll probably take us best part of like 30 or 40 minutes. I'll try and leave pauses for some questions, Dan, but also feel free to butt in.
I think it might be good to quickly nip over to Patch Bay and do a DarkCrystal just so it sets like the index framing.
Yeah, sure. So as a reminder, we've got these DarkCrystals. You can make a new DarkCrystal, give it a name, put a secret in here with the location of my treasure is whatever it is, and then I can set Dan, Hassan, Alana, Mikey as my custodians, and any two of them can like recover the secret underneath the cabbage tree on Eureka Street. My gold, yeah. And then if I'm not going to do this because it'll put it in my log forever, but we can perform the ritual and it will send out these shards to each of these people, and it will also record on my device the details, some of the details of this, as in like what was it called, what was the quorum, what was the sharding function that we used, so that when we get things back, we know how to put it back together. So that's like the record of the ritual. Might have some other things, we'll see. And then on the other end, what it looks like is, so here's an example of a safe one to look at. This is a, I just called it progenitor because it was the first working DarkCrystal sharding. So this is the history of the people that have sent out. You can also like request, so it's not showing because this one's closed. You can invite your friends to give their shards back to you or request them back, and then the process of them returning it is another sort of message, I think. And then finally, once you've got a quorum, so I just needed 2 of them back, but I got all 5 back, you can push this button and it shows the secret. So in this case, I just put an ASCII thing in there as like something fun. Is that good enough, Dan?
Yeah, that's great. And then the final bit might be, oh no, that's a bit too revealing. So on the interface, a bit in the parent of this, you've then got a list of others' shards. So that's people who've requested you. I'm
not going there right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this is just from the perspective of people of sending things out. Yeah. So let's look a little bit quickly at the shapes of those messages. So this is SSB DarkCrystal schema. This defines the shapes of all of those messages. Looks like this readme is a little bit malformed, but the data's all there. So we're not going to talk about this one so much, but it just gives you, this is just a nice reference for the example of what they look like. So there's this thing called a root message, and this is not the ritual, it's just a placeholder for, it's like a stake in the sand around which other data is going to be gathered. So when we use things like backlinks, we can do a backlinks lookup and say all messages related to this particular route. The ritual this is the one with the details about what actually happened with the ritual. But the name was on this one. The ritual was here. So here we're using, for example, secrets.js. We might be actually using secrets screenpay, I think, now. But that's the point, is that this can change and it will help you know how to put it back together. The recipients, this is an example of like me. Like it's only got one recipient, and that's me, because I don't want to like publish the details about this to anyone else. It's just encrypted to me. And then we've got this shard, and a shard is it's got the shard, which is like it's actually an encrypted shard, so only the person who you're sending it to can read it. And this one has two recipients. It's got myself and another person like Dan. And so each of the shards, so if there are 5 shards, 5 of these messages go out. And then there's another module, SSB invite schema. So we've used the generic type of invite for like, I'm inviting you to send some stuff back. I don't know if this document doesn't have what it looks like, but I can just dive into the repo really quickly. So, yeah, this is a bit dense to read, but you can, yeah, I'm not going to go into it. It's too hard to do really quickly. Dan, do you have any questions?
No, that's good framing so far. I've turned off the video to save on bandwidth, but let me know if you want it back on.
I don't think it costs anything. So, yeah. Seeing your confused or concerned face is useful data. Okay, so we've got I think it might be called invite response or something was the last type of message. And then, yeah, so those are the message types that it's built up of. The user flow and sort of the methods have been grouped a little bit as well. So we've got this idea of like sharing and recovering. So sharing is like the process which involves you set up a route, declare a ritual, send out shards. And the recovering arc uses the invites and the invite responses. Okay, so let's look at an example method in here. This is a bit that I would have liked to have prepped a little bit more. So here's what scuttle-dark-crystal looks like. You can see some of those things here. There's the root, the shard, and the ritual. And then we've got other domains for the sort of like higher level patterns, which are the sharing and the recovering. And then there's a lib folder which has just helping methods which get used across the project. So maybe we'll look at publish. So this is pretty mundane, hopefully. Maybe we'll write this from scratch. We'll just grab this, and in this scratch pad, we want a method which publishes publish a root message, I think it was. And so the format of it will be basically something like this. And so it has a name like that. So the red stuff is like things that aren't being used right now. There's errors coming up. So when we want to publish something, we go server.publish that message content, and it takes care of like signing it and doing stuff, but we still don't have the server thing provided.
You mean publish route, presumably?
Sorry?
Server.publish route content, is that right?
No.
Okay.
So publish is a method on the SBot server.
Okay.
And when we give it this object, it will take care of
Got it.
signing it, timestamping it, hashing it to make the final key.
Great.
So this method isn't very complicated. The problem is that we don't have a server, so we could either have like a server defined outside of it, the scope up here, some SBot server. But the pattern that we take with the scuttle modules is to go like, oh, well, we could go like that, but the downside of that is all of our this is going to be a problem with all of our modules. Like all of them are going to be either reading from the server or asking the server to write things, and it's just a bit mundane to preface it here every time. So there's a couple of ways of getting around this. The way I've chosen to go is to use a closure. Like this. So then when you use this, you go publish route, give it an SBot connection, and then say, my gold is the name of this sharding ritual. And then, yep. So one of the advantages of this is something that I'll get to later, which is the like general scuttle module pattern. Yeah. Any questions about that, Dan?
No, that's neat.
Yeah. So actually, this is not completely true. This is not a good example because, this code is incorrect because this publish method is asynchronous. It's not synchronous. So actually, you send something to the server and hopefully it happens at some time soon and we get a call back from the server, which is gonna have the like classic error data, in this case the publish message if it's worked format. So actually the format's more like that. And so an example of how you'd use that would be like is that all right? Okay, so we could, yeah. So there's actually another layer we add, which is check the content is, because the server doesn't care what you publish as long as it has a type property. It's like, all good, bro, I will publish this for you. And as long as there are valid recipients in there, as long as they are valid feed IDs, it'll be like, oh, recipients, I'm going to encrypt that to those people for you. But it doesn't, if we did this, at the moment that would also publish, and then we would have a DarkCrystal root with a name attribute, which would be an object called beat boot, which is going to break things down the line. So what we do here is we check the content is a valid DC root. So what we do here is if is root, do server.publish, else callback like that. And is root is a method that we get from the schema module. Like that. How's that down?
That's great.
Cool.
So the schemas act as like a pre-publish validator.
Yeah. So we use them on getting and on pulling as well. That way, it's like very hard to accidentally publish junk that will break logic. And as you read things out, you also put this. You can put this sieve in place as well, and just put, as it comes past, be like, actually, that's malformed. And you can decide what to do with that. You can either say it's malformed and try and display it, but more carefully, like print it out as raw content, or you can just chuck it out if you want. So let's look at here's the actual publish method. And interestingly, we've got server.private.publish. So this isn't actually needed. Oh, and I forgot that isRoot, if isRoot returns false, then there are specific errors that it generates and attaches to the validator, so you can just go like this. Yeah. Okay, so that's a specific method. Are you getting much background noise, by the way, from me?
None.
Okay, cool, because there's a neighbor that's, yeah, we live near a noisy place. Okay, so we've looked at an example method. So we looked at root. It was under async. Root async publish.js. Root async publish. So now we're going to look at the scuttle-module pattern. Turns out like I mentioned earlier, that we use this pattern of a closure with the server on the outermost level. You can use any of these methods standalone by just grabbing them, reaching into the module and grabbing them and using them exactly like this. But I figured if all of them have this pattern, we could write a function which does something like publish root. And then go do something with the methods where like we go, I'm no good at this, writing this logic really quickly, but so like for each value in that methods object, go and give it the server. So basically, like if I was going to do this like manually with this, I would go methods.publish root equals publish root server. And so I've like replaced it with a version that's had that outer level of like closure run already. So that means that after this, I could go methods dot publish root my gold callback like that. And it just means we don't, yeah. Any questions about that, Dan?
Can you show me specifically that rather than the pseudocode where it is in the code?
Yep. I'll just do this one last piece of example here. So this means that like once you've done this function which goes through and like manually does this so it takes care of doing all of that, and it means you just never need to, once you've run this function that does that, it's all just sorted. Yeah, so let's go look at the methods. So here's all of the methods, and there's another layer that I'm going to come back to, like why they're nested like this. But here is root async publish that we were looking at. So this is all of those methods, and then the index.js takes all of those raw methods in. I've called them raw because they're like, nothing's been done to them. And then we run this method called inject, and we give inject the server and the methods, and it just goes through all of those methods and goes, here's your server for all of them. And then the thing it returns is an object which has all of these activated methods on it. So like looking at it,
what's known as the deject method, or
no,
a pattern? No, it's different.
Deject is something different. So that was okay. Like scuttle inject. So here's it being used. The way you'd use it is like DarkCrystal is the raw module, and then when you run DarkCrystal and give it a server, you get like an instantiated version of DarkCrystal, which now has all of these methods that you can use, like DarkCrystal share, async share, and then give it all of those things. Yeah.
That's neat. So a lot of the setup complexities kind of taken care of.
Yeah. So what's really nice about this is at the top level you can require DarkCrystal, give it a server, and then you've got like this activated helper that you can pass around anywhere, and you don't need to like keep setting it up or keep worrying. You don't need to hand the server down. You can just hand this like this bundle of methods around that are ready to talk to the server. So scuttle inject does some fancy stuff. So coming back to why are these methods nested like this? There's a couple of reasons. One of them is, so we've got like root async publish, right? The reason we've put it under async and why we've put it in this async folder, so you notice that the folder structure matches this pretty verbose structure here, is that for a developer, it's a good reminder that it's an asynchronous method, and it like immediately tells you something about what the signature of it's going to be, as in it's going to take a callback. Whereas something under the pull domain is going to be a pull stream source probably. So root pull mine, that's pretty terrible naming, but it will pull all of my roots, the roots of all of my shards. So that gets used on the index page, for example. And root pull backlinks will probably get you all of the backlinks associated with a particular root, and it will do it in a streaming way, which means you can get live updates, stuff like that. So partly it's like helps with clear naming and setting up clear expectations about like what you're going to get out of the method. And secondly, we actually lean on this, like it's a requirement for the way that I wrote scuttle inject. There's some fanciness that's taken care in the background where it behaves differently. It deals with async methods and pull stream methods differently. Yeah, and it takes care of some details. So basically, you can give, rather than just giving this module a raw connection to the SBot, you can actually give it a connection which will recover and reconnect itself once it, if anything goes wrong, which makes it a little bit more resilient. And all of these methods will know about that and behave well. Yeah, is the idea. So we don't have time to get into that detail, but yeah, it's some opinions that were made. Any questions about that, Dan?
It's I get it. Yes. Do I grok it? Internalize? No, but that's due. I just need to sit with it more and look through, and that's not due to a lack of clear explanation. Rather, getting my coding brain back in gear.
That's fine. Yeah. So let's look at a more complicated method. Share async share. This was the top level method, which where we set up. So share is like the shorthand for when the whole process of setting up a new DarkCrystal sharding. So it publishes a root message, a ritual, which contains the details about that about what you're about to do, and then like sends out all of these shards. Could be 5 shards or 10 shards or whatever. So it does quite a lot. So you can see it. We're requiring in the simple publishing methods for root, ritual, and shards, and some more detail here, which we're not going to go and look at straight away. And it follows the same sort of closure pattern where we've got like a server, a function that expects a server at the top level, and then it returns the useful method. And then we've got some like kind of crude. This could actually do with some reusing, rework. I think we should probably be, rather than throwing errors, we should be sending errors through the callback and saying, yeah. And there's like all sorts of checks that are done, like when you pass in some recipients, like the list of friends that you want to send things to, is it a unique set of recipients? Like, have I mentioned Dan twice? We've got the opinion that you shouldn't be able to send the same person to 2 shards. That's just an opinion we've added. And we're checking whether the list includes ourselves. It shouldn't do. We're also checking that the quorum has been set appropriately. Things like you can't have, so some of these checks are checks that the schema, it's hard to encode in the schema. So you can check that the quorum has a minimum value, but you can't, it's harder to compare 2 different values. So for example, there's logic related between the quorum number, the minimum number of people you need, shards you need to reconstruct things, and the number of shards you've actually going to send out, right? Like if the quorum was 7 and you only send out 5 shards, you're pretty screwed. So don't allow that stuff. So there's heaps of checks here, and then we like publish a root message first, and once that's done, we publish the ritual, which has the details. So you can see there's a nested callbacks, like in the callback of like once the root is published, then we move on to publishing the ritual, and then finally we have this method that publishes all of the shards in one go. And So this method exists because you don't want to publish 3 of the shards and then discover for some reason that you can't publish the last 2 because they're like invalid for some reason. So some of that detail is handled by this method here. And then finally, we call back with all of the data that we've collected through publishing those like 3 volleys of things. So that's like this is like one of the most complicated methods. Any questions about that, Dan?
So to run back through this, publish all shards is to try and introduce, I think in database language, it would be called ACID. So atomicity, consistency, isolation, and I can't remember the D, but it basically means all or nothing. So either you want the transaction to go through or not, but you don't want it to go through partially.
Yeah, it's going for something like that. Scuttlebutt doesn't let you do batch publishing at the moment. So we're just doing very careful checks over the details before we attempt to start publishing them. I haven't looked at that method again recently, but
that's cool. It makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's looking at, so we've looked at the scuttle-module pattern, and we've looked at a simple case and then like a beefier case of a method. Now let's go look at some testing. So we're using tape for testing. We'll start with like a simple one, like let's look at root publish.test. So we've got this, we've just suffixed things with .test.js, and that's just a convenience thing. It means that in our scripts in npm, I can just run it. Please all work. Means in our tests, so we've got this test script which just goes and looks for all files which have test.js in the test folder and then runs them with tape, and then the pretty printing with the nice ticks and stuff and nice erroring is managed by tapdiff. So let's look at this. So we've got this dummy test bot. We can go and look at that in a little bit. Yeah. So, and then we're requiring in the method that we're wanting to test. And then this is very similar to, so we're actually using tape, an extension of tape, which is tape plus, which gives you the ability to do some like before and after hooks, which can be quite handy when you're doing a lot of tests and you don't want to like repeat yourself too much. So at the start of every test, we instantiate the server. So we like turn on a server, and then once we're done with each test, we close the server. And this is us sort of activating the method. So remember, every method has that closure thing around it, which expects a server. So there's this kind of loose convention where like capital letter versions of things represent like kind of like a constructor, and lowercase versions of the same thing is an instantiated, like ready to go instance of that thing. So that's why these are named the way they are. Yep, so we've got publish set up. So here we're testing the happy case. We publish something with a name, and there shouldn't be any errors. We should get back a root message, and if we go and look inside that root message, root.value.content.name, it should be equal to name, the name that we set up, like my first DarkCrystal. Any questions about that? Are you muted?
No, it's clear.
Yeah, so there's like a little bit of learning how to write tape or tape plus style tests, but you can kind of read the docs and it's fairly clear, and you can also...
It's somewhat similar in Ruby realm to, is it called Cucumber or Capybara or stuff like that? It's somewhat
RSpec
similar.
or something, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think this is quite similar to RSpec, and Kieran set this up, and he's familiar with RSpec. So I was skeptical to start with, but I think it's actually really elegant. Some people are like dead purists and don't do any pretty printing and wouldn't like this before eaches and describe contexts, but I think it helps a lot. I guess the only thing I'd mention is there's this next function, which I would call like done probably. And it's a method that's run, because all of these tests are running asynchronously, you don't know when you're done. And so this is like after the publish happens, we've checked all of these things, and this done is inside the callback to that publish, because it has to be inside here. Like this wouldn't work if it was out here. That's just a little gotcha. Because asynchronously, what would happen if this was here is this method would run, and it would go away to the database, and then that would be running on a process, and then immediately afterwards, this method would call done, and then the test would close, and we just wouldn't get to this code. Or yeah, I think it would break it. We'll just try it. Yeah, so it may not have broken it, but it might not have run those tests either. The 80 tests versus... Oh, I'm wrong. Cool. So yeah, this avoids, it could be a race condition thing, and it's just fine in this case. So that's a very simple test. I'll just carry on. Feel free to, I'm just watching the time as well.
Yeah, I've got a time check coming up. Let's go back to the scrap pad that you have, and maybe...
that was the last thing.
Run through what we've looked at.
I just wanted to like really quickly show that you can do like, so we do have like, we have tests on the like very simplest methods, which kind of a good sanity check, and is also like good practice. Probably most important in my opinion of these, like, because we've got schemas in place and the schemas are well tested, that's fine. We're pretty confident those will work, and if something's bung, the schema will throw problems at you in a good way. So most important are these like high-level methods which are doing multiple things. Sometimes if they're like complicated, then it's useful to build like lower-level things, lower-level modules and methods and tests over those. But yeah, this is like an example of testing over like a much beefier method. So yeah, let's look back and close, and maybe any closing questions. So what we looked at was, we actually didn't end up looking at these two, but there are these like probably 4 to 5 different types of messages. There's the root message, which is the stake in the sand, a ritual which contains the details about which sharding function was actually used, because you need to know that in case versions change or whatever. And also like how many shards and what the quorum was. And then the shards are these individual shards. So we didn't look at the details of those, but you can have a go and have a look at those if you're interested. Yes. And then we looked at, and then I like sort of mentioned that there are these higher level domains, or like they're kind of user flows, and it's like the sending out, broadly speaking, and then the like getting back in, so asking for things back, receiving them back in, and then like putting them back together. So I think there's like a recover and a recombine method maybe in there. We looked at a simple method. This is pretty much it here. And the key pattern in here is that there's this closure with the server on the outermost function, which generates a function, which is your actual useful method. And and then we looked at the broad pattern of scuttle type modules, which is like, yeah, take all of those methods, which are closures, and then nest them like this in this big methods object. And then you give that to this scuttle inject module, and it like jams a copy of the server in each of those methods so that they're all ready to go. There's also this, I didn't mention it, but there's this like plugin dependency, which is an optional argument, and which is really useful. You can check, you want to check whether the server that you've received has actually the plugins installed on it required to be able to do the things that you want to do. So with some of the pull stream things, we actually need to make sure that that SSB query is installed. So it just does a really simple check and goes, server.query, is that even a thing? Server.query.read, is that a thing? And if it's not, then it explodes.
There's a lot of elegance wrapped in.
It's just kind of boilerplate stuff that saves people time and too much thinking, or too much fussing about when you're going to do it repeatedly.
So when I was, sorry, I'm interrupting. Have you finished the loop through?
No. So that was the scuttle module pattern, and then yeah, testing with tape. And so we didn't look closely at it, but there's this test bot. So this is a module written by Pete, which looks very similar to, or behaves very similar to a scuttlebot, but it sets up a temporary scuttlebot, so the stuff that you're publishing is just in your temp folder and gets flushed eventually. But yeah, that's all. Yeah, reflections or other questions, Jan?
I've loved this. I'm going to come back and watch it time and again, I'm sure. I think this breaking off small chunks and putting it into 45 minutes segments is pretty useful use of time.
Yeah.
At a higher level, when I was prepping for this call, I was struck by, although I hadn't fully grokked how things were working, everything feels like it's quite understandably laid out, given I didn't previously have my head in the code. So this is my first time running through it, and I feel like I can get my head around it with time. So that's a really good thing. I'm reminded that you, Kieran and Peg, smashed out some quite high quality work very quickly, given that was written in like 2, 3, or 4 weeks. So it's just like more reflections and appreciations on what is there that we have to work from as a base from now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll go away, come up with more questions, and maybe we could do like one of these a week or something like that, like 45 minutes or however.
I'm happy to do another one as well. I think
we obviously didn't get to the views, so that's a whole whole other side.
Yeah, that. I think I can slice that into 2 different parts. Maybe, yeah. Hopefully we've written the code in a way such that you don't need to learn everything all at once.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. I'll pause recording there.